This is episode 2 of the Tai Chi for Complete Beginners series. And of course, it's not just for beginners, it's for anybody that wants to have a detailed look at your postures. We're beginning this form, the 37 short form. We worked through the first 2 postures last time. So today we're going to do 3 and 4. And for people who are watching this that don't do short form, the sequence of the entire first section is very, very close to what we do in the traditional long form. The only difference is when we get to the brush knee section that we do one brush knee, a play guitar, and then another brush knee. And what we've done then is we've taken out another play guitar and 3 more brush knees. So other than that, the beginning is identical. So anyways, carrying on, last time I did talk about some basics, and basically what I was talking about was the lower body movement stances that are most common to Tai Chi. So one of the things that I didn't put a lot of emphasis on is that when we're in these stances, and it really doesn't matter which stance it is, you want to train these stances to the point that it actually feels like you are sitting on something, not supporting yourself on one leg or 2 legs, but actually sitting on a chair of some kind or a stool of some kind. So in the forward stance, when you're sitting in a position like this is a demonstration I do quite often. We have some tables in the workout area. What I'll go do is take the corner of the table and just plunk myself down onto it, sitting like this, with obviously the support of my entire body back here on my butt. So the leg positioning comes out to being almost exactly this. The next thing that I do is I kind of gradually ease myself off of that table and let people have a look, and the difference is almost 0. This, to me, when I'm sitting like this, it actually does feel like I'm sitting on something. So one of the imaginations that I encourage people to use is that you have a chair that you're sitting on, and it's a rolling chair. So when you roll backwards, you can still sit onto one hip or the other. As you're coming forward, we don't suddenly jump out of our chair and destroy our alignment and do all kinds of crazy things. All we do is scoot our chair forward with us still sitting. Now, this does take some conditioning, and Tai Chi in general does take some conditioning. So upper body is not what people feel first. What most people feel is that their thighs are weak, and accompanying that is that the joints don't work very well. So by doing this exercise steadily and then incorporating into the form and doing the form regularly, we do build up quite a bit of strength in the lower body, and we build up quite a bit of supplements right where seniors, and not just seniors, but people in their 30s and 40s even, some people can't bend very well because they have so much stiffness and tightness in their bodies. Well, working your hips in this manner works your knees, works your ankles, works your feet, and also goes into your back. And again, if you're doing it correctly, it will even start to develop some really interesting stretches in the upper body. So that was last time, and I just wanted to add that a little bit of extra information that when you're doing a posture, and like I said, it doesn't matter which posture, you want to develop that posture to the point, not only are you bent and aligned, but it actually feels to you that you're sitting on something of substance, like there's a chair or a stool underneath you. Okay, and it doesn't matter which side that you're on. You should be very stable and very rooted. Of course, that's a major property of Tai Chi. So today, the basic I want to talk about is in the upper body, and it's very similar. This is a rooting of the upper body. The classics talk about shoulders and elbows, And basically what they're saying is that they should both be sunk like that. This is not released or rooted, and neither is this. This is very opposite. There's a lot of tension, there's major misalignments, and what I'm doing is I'm actually injuring my shoulder when I move like that. So we want to heal, and part of how we heal is that we move our body correctly, and we go into places that are kind of like long forgotten places, maybe places we haven't exercised for quite some time. So this idea of having your hands roughly in a formation where the elbow's down and the shoulder down, now similar to when we're in a stance and you want to imagine that you're actually sitting on something, that there's a chair or a table or something that you can release yourself onto, that creates a certain amount of compression in the body that we are going to even out, but it does create compression. Now, when we have our hands in a position like this, if you just kind of mimic this position, and it's quite light, that's not really the idea yet. The idea is more as if the arm and the shoulder are actually being pulled downwards. And then depending on the posture and depending on what the lower body is doing, the arm actually sits, or a better word for me anyways is that the arm actually compresses down onto your lower body. So that's the upper body rooting onto your lower body. And that connection is very vital in Tai Chi. If we don't have the entire body rooted, then we don't have body as a single unit. And that also is a major principle of Tai Chi. So the various arm positions that we go into, all of these should have that same property of the shoulder feels pulled down onto the hip and the hip feels pulled down onto the foot. This area takes a little bit longer to develop, but the upper arm should be the same thing. And you can test this if you have a friend that will come along and put a little bit of pressure, or if you have a good imagination and you imagine a 5-pound beanbag or something on your upper arm, you need to be able to hold that in place without tightening. And in fact, what you're going to do is you're going to use the structure of your body to hold that in place. So if you're up like this is a broken part of your body, and by that I mean this is not really attached to your body anymore. Right? To attach your arm so that we can work as a single unit and so we can root, we need to let go, and let go the hand almost always pointing upwards. So when we do this, the arm starts to become very, very heavy, and the shoulder also will start to have a lot of work on it, and that's when the conditioning of the upper body starts to cut in a little bit more. I mean, if you're doing long form and you're going through long form, even if your arms aren't doing this, you're still going to get a certain amount of work. But if you add this extra layer, which is mostly at this point theory and imagination, if you can imagine that your arm is always being pulled down onto your onto your lower body, that will add a huge step forward for you to uniting the body, aligning the body, and to being able to root the body. So one other thing about that is that the arms, when we say arms, there is a whole bunch of other body parts involved in doing these kind of things. So my chest, for instance, depending if I'm back or forward, the chest slightly opens and closes when you're doing something like push. In single whip, the chest does the same thing. The back is also opening and closing very slightly as we go through. But the feeling is that the movement of your arm and chest and back have to be synchronized with each other. So if your arm moves and it's moving like this, obviously that's not very connected to your body. So first thing is to get the timing and the coordination so that when you withdraw, your arms withdraw. When you go forward, your arms go forward. Now I'm purposely doing this wrong. The timing is close, but it's wrong, and my arms aren't really connected. To have the arms connected, they almost have to be pulled in. Here, strangely enough, my chest is actually opening on this movement. If you do this and touch yourself here, you should find your pectorals are engaged and slightly plumped outwards. When we do the next movement, one of the first things that happens is my chest starts to retreat so that my arms can move correctly. And whenever my chest retreats, that means my back is opening more, and this line becomes more available to me on this particular motion. So, not wanting to go into too much detail, we don't just move arms, right? You can't just put your arm out in that kind of a manner, and it's not just that the hip sits, the shoulder sits on the hip either. There's a whole bunch. I don't know if you can see that, but I have a big concave curve right here when my arm goes out like that. Now that concave spot is not always there. Right now, it's not there. Right now, because my arm is down, my chest is actually a little bit forward. So every movement that we make, the chest and the back have to coordinate with the arms, and it's very good. Maybe I'll dedicate one of these episodes solely to how your chest moves when your arm moves, because there are some fairly basic rules. And here's one, just to get you started. If your arm or hand is going up, it's very simple to test. If you can do this with your arms straight but not locked, hips slightly bent, and very, very relaxed to your torso, just bring your arm up to point to the ceiling. Okay, the elbow should not be bent at all to do this. If you do, the movement goes away from the shoulder to the elbow and you won't get an accurate reading. But what does happen, if you do this correctly, is that your chest rounds inwards and it actually goes slightly downwards at the same time. Okay, now, if I keep a light pressure here as my arm comes down, what I'll find is that the exact opposite happens. As my arm is coming down, the chest slightly goes up and forward. So this is counterintuitive to a lot of people, but when you're doing Tai Chi, you should be aware. I mean, you don't need this actual rule. If you're doing Tai Chi correctly in a released manner, this will just happen. But most people need a little bit of coaching on it. So here you go. When your arm goes up, then your chest sinks. So in a movement like this, with the arm up, this side should be concave. Now here's a very interesting thing, because in single whip, when I'm in this position and this arm is down, if I check on this side, my pectoral muscle is actually plumped forward. So just speaking of my chest, half of my chest in single whip is withdrawn and rounded in, and the other half is going up and forward. So a very interesting posture to explore. All of our postures, the same kind of thing is happening as we go through our postures. So a very interesting thing to play with and to advance your Tai Chi skill. So we're going to today go into rollback and do rollback and then press. And we're just going to pause very briefly, and I'll be back and go through those in detail with you. If we have enough time left, I'm planning on going through the entire first section with you in a follow-along manner, and very, very slowly to help you build up strength and suppleness. So I'm back in a moment. So I want to begin this portion of our second episode by going to an angle where you can see my arms move quite clearly. When I turn to this side, you can see what's happening on my back and side, but you can't get the details of the hands that well. So this, I'm going to be very casual, I'm not really sitting in a stance yet. This hand position, this is ward off to the right, and a lot of people get this posture and press confused. So press, you can see I'm actually touching with my palm the other hand, and both my arms are roughly 45-degree angle. In ward off to the right, this hand, my left hand, is well back from my right arm and not anyway close to it. And my right arm is in a ward off or wave hands sort of position, it's not on a 45-degree angle. This arm is tucked all the way down with my elbow sitting on my rib. So that's the arm positioning that we're going to begin in, and then from there, the next movement is the beginning of rollback. And what we do on the first movement is we're going to rotate on the front hip and shoulder, and we're actually adding a little bit of extra weight onto the front hip. So it's a rotation. We end up, now the left arm is in kind of a ward-off wave hands position, and my right hand is not exactly pointing straight up. It's on a very slight angle, but it's more or less facing upwards. So that movement, what is happening to create that is that right here my shoulder is rolling outwards this way, and my hip is going to be doing the same thing. So if you're doing this and you can get your shoulder to sit on your hip, you should find that they synchronize pretty much perfectly, and when you roll one or rotate one, the other one rotates as well. So if you're not at that stage yet, that's fine. Just loosen and sync your shoulder and front hip as much as you can, and eventually you'll start working your way inside the joints, and you should eventually be able to rotate the actual shoulder to get to this position. So here, the movement is this way also. The whole arm is tucking a little bit to end up in that position. So that's the first movement. The second movement is very small. All we do is bring ourselves back. If I was facing exactly this way, this was my front, then when I do the first one, I may be off at about 10 degrees or so. Here I come straight back. Now, the next movement that we're going to make is not the way that we would do it in practice if we were actually working with a partner. This has to be changed very subtly, but it will help with a lot of the attributes of this posture. The third movement is that the arms withdraw towards your body, and there's no rotation at this point. So from this position, as we sit back, our entire body should be as if being pulled through my rear hip and down into my rear foot. So we've gone here, 1, 2, now loosen and sit a little bit. Let yourself be pulled through your hip. That should roughly be the end of 3. On 4, as I do turn on my rear hip, this is all going to drop, bringing the hand very slightly up, and I should end with my left hand pointing exactly to my front, pointing to where my opponent would be. So again, going through those 4, that's 1, 2, now just sit and release your body, the chest very soft through here, and your hips sinking, the head pulled up and the neck pulled up. We sink backwards, that's 3, and then on 4, the arms actually slightly separate with the front hand going circularly forward and the rear hand circularly backward. So both of those circles are very small, but they're quite necessary. When you start working with someone and that person is pushing on your arm as you go back, if you move the entire arm, you may end up fighting that person. And of course, we don't want to have a force against force situation. So what we do is we create an auger. There's a full rotation going on through the arm, here into the shoulder, into the hip, and that auger almost pulls your partner off balance. And it works very, very well. It's very effective, and it's a good example of how we don't want to lose, we don't want to oppose, but we do want to win. So rather than opposing, I went with the person. This is actually an attacking arm, and we may get into that at some point. When I do this, not only did I get rid of my opponent without fighting them, but they're also set up for this arm to do something to them that is basically, that's returning the fight to them. Or I shouldn't really say fight because it's not ever that kind of a thing. It's Tai Chi applied martially. If you see people tightening up and jumping around and doing hard stuff, that is not Tai Chi. What we do through our training is we become so good at adjusting our body with integrity and root and heaviness that when we match with another person, we try to apply those qualities in the match. So what we do is we move and move and move, maintaining always our accuracy of movement and our integrity, and we wait for the opponent to make an error, or we'll help induce them to make an error. Now, when they do make that error, because they are not capable of moving the way that we do, we simply apply with maybe a little bit more speed or a little bit more weight. We apply what we always do when we're training in the form to them, and usually the person will either fall down or bounce up or be bounced away. And I do hope that now that the pandemic is easing and we can work with each other again, I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to show you some videos of basic postures like ward off or roll back, and doing them with partners. So you get an idea that Tai Chi strategy is completely different from hardstyle. You know, we can't, we don't train like hardstyle, so we can't apply our techniques the same way a hardstylist would. For instance, we have very little hitting. So anyways, that is rollback, and showing it from this side, you should be able to see that I didn't move my arm. We always try to stay away from moving our arm. So what happens to get my arm to go into a new position is I sink and rotate through my hip, I sink and rotate through my shoulder at exactly the same time, and my arm is levered into position. And when it arrives in that position, it's going to be very rooted, it's going to have really good integrity, and even if some strength is coming to that arm, I'm still going to be able to deal with that strength, but not by fighting it. Excuse me. So that is one. I said a little bit more on the front. Two, still sitting on the front, but also sitting on the rear. Head very straight, very relaxed, shoulders down and hips down and breath down. So that's two. Then on three, there's a fairly substantial weight change, and when I do that, I'm sitting into my rear hip, which should result, as always, with my knee moving inwards, just like that. So that's how much my knee moved inwards, and not because I moved my knee. That's moving body parts. We don't move body parts, we adjust body parts. So by loosening here, as the weight goes to it, my knee tucks. This is very natural. It's not me making that happen, it's me allowing that to happen. So by releasing your body, by practicing release and by practicing the postures over and over and over again, you'll discover some very, very interesting things about your body that all end up helping you to heal your body. So let's do that one again. This is 1, 2, go down a little bit as always. 3, we sit to the rear. And on 4, we're going to turn to almost 45 degrees. My rear hand should be pointing almost exactly forward. My high arm is also going to be pointing. So in fact, both of my arms end up, they're pointing almost exactly to wherever your front happens to be in that moment. So one more time from this angle. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that is the end of the rollback. So Master Liang called this posture rollback. He said this is half of Tai Chi. If you can master rollback, he said, then you have got 50% of Tai Chi. So I hope that's motivating for you. Anyway, back in a moment again, and when I come back, we're going to be working on press. Okay, once again, I'm going to start with my left side to the camera so that you can see details on my arm movement. We ended the last segment, we were at the end of rollback, standing in this kind of a position. And just to go back to the beginning of the tape, right now, on my rear hip, I do feel very aligned and very balanced, and I do feel as if I can just sit on my rear hip. Okay, at the end of rollback, it's not a 100% weight shift by any means, but it's something along the lines of 70-30. Really what I'm speaking to is that by releasing here, letting your hip sink a bit, and that's not proper sink, that's way too loose, and you're losing integrity and alignment when you move like that. It's just enough of a sink that you feel stable and that you're exercising your hip. So here we are at the end, and the next movement, the way that I was originally taught, the hand would make a very, very large circle going up to shoulder height on one. We then rotate through the shoulder and the hip to bring the hand back. So that second rotation coming backward, that should serve to pull the hand, and in fact, I have done demonstrations where I'll allow someone to pull my arm and demonstrate root by sitting. So as they pull, I release and sit a little bit more. And again, without turning it into a war and turning it into, I'm going to pull you over come hell or high water. It's just a test to see if there is any integrity and any root in that position. And indeed there is. So this is the old way. By the way, if your arm's moving, your hip and waist have to be moving. If you move your arm and there's no movement in the waist and hip, then immediately you've broken, and this arm, in this case, will not be whole body, it'll be moving on its own, and there's absolutely no way you're going to be able to root that arm or have integrity in that arm. So the entire time that arm is going backward, we need to release through the hip and through the shoulder and turn at the same time. So that is one, when the palm gets to about shoulder height. Now to bring the arm back, I'm going to fold on the elbow and sit more and rotate to the front with that arm almost just falling onto my chest. So the other arm, as we're doing that, it stays where it is here, big, big opening of the body, and then when we get to here, the two arms are actually touching at this point, so this arm is withdrawn slightly. The next motion is to further sink the rear hip, and that increased compression of sinking the rear hip, this actually moves my body forward. So at the end of 3, I'm going to be sitting in this manner. My belly button is not 100% aligned to my front thigh just yet, but when I do the next motion here, and I sink a little bit more, now my belly button has sunk, my waist has sunk onto my front hip, and that pulled my belly button over a little bit. So that's the end of press, with a big sink of the entire body and a very slight twist to the right, on the right hip for now. It will eventually involve the entire body twisting, but if you can get that small, small twist as you sink to go mainly on your front hip, then you're going to be doing quite well. And oddly enough, it doesn't look like we're exerting power when we do that, or for that matter, when we do push, we don't look like we're exerting a lot of power. And people wonder, how can that be an effective movement? Well, I do hope to show you fairly soon how this will not only throw someone off, but you can throw a person down, or you can cause them to spin and fall. There's all kinds of energy coming out of your body when you do this correctly. So we don't have to do something like that. That is not what we do. Okay, so there's two more postures for you. So now we have preparation and opening, which I don't really count as part of the form, but you can if you like. And then word off left we did last time, word off right we did last time, and reviewed it a little bit today. And then today we did roll back, very important posture, and we also did press. So you can say we either have 4 or 6 postures that we've done so far. In any case, if you do the form right from the formal beginning, then you will be doing 6 postures. So I'm going to check the time, and if we have time, I'll go through the entire first section quite slowly with you, a conditioning round. And if we don't, maybe I'll just film it anyways, and we can consider it bonus material. So thanks for your attention, and I hope that you're finding these videos helpful.